There are quite a few differences between male chameleons and female chameleons. Not only how they look, but also how we care for them. So today, I'm going to be going over those with you. So without further ado, let's get into the video. You may be watching this video during your research phase, trying to decide if you want a male or a female. This is a great video. Or you already have a chameleon and you're like, I'm not sure if I have a male or a female. So we can go ahead and talk about some of those things, but I also have videos dedicated just to determining if you have a male or a female chameleon, so feel free to check those out if you're interested. But first thing we're going to talk about are the physical differences. So we're going to work our way through Panthers, Veileds, and Jackson's chameleon, given those are the most commonly kept chameleons in captivity. So we can start with Veileds. The biggest difference between the males and the females, just looking at them, is the males will have bigger casques. So the big pointy part on the top of their head is called a casque. Females will still have them, they'll just be smaller, and the males will be bigger. So that's how you can tell when they're adults if you have a male or a female. On the back of their feet, if it's smooth, then you'll have a female. If there's a little bump called a tarsal spur, then you have a male. They're born with that. So if you have a teeny tiny baby, that's the best way to tell if you have a male or a female. And then as they get older and get their adult colors, the males will have more yellows than the females. They'll have kind of like yellow vertical bars on their body. Not always, but this is typically what we see with the males, whereas the females will have more subdued colors and typically more spots than stripes. I'll put pictures on the screen so you can kind of see what I'm talking about, and then the males just tend to have a bit more vibrant colors than the females do. Now when it comes to panther chameleons, the biggest difference between the males and the females is the colors, and you can only see these when they're adults or juveniles getting closer to adulthood. The females will be a peachy color, and then the males are the ones that are gonna have the bright, vibrant colors. Very similar to peacocks, how the males have like the crazy feathers, and then the females have like the me kind of ones. Same thing with panther chameleons. So if you want the greens, blues, reds, purples, those are all gonna be with the males, and then the females will have the more peachy pink colors, which are still beautiful, just different. And then if you're trying to sex a baby panther chameleon, they're all born brown. They all look the exact same if you're going just off of colors. So then you'll have to look for a hemipenes, which is the male reproductive organ, on a baby chameleon to be able to tell if they're male or female. But this can take time to learn how to look for that, but there's additional resources online if you want to check that out. And then with Jackson's chameleons, a lot of people think if it has horns, it's a male, but there are different species of Jackson's chameleons, and there are Jackson female chameleons that do also have horns. So keep that in mind when you're considering getting a chameleon. Okay, so that is like colors, casques, horns, just high level of all the commonly kept species. So now let's talk about the size of the chameleon. So the females will be significantly smaller than the male chameleons. The males, I'm gonna use my hands, but these are just rough ballparks. The males will be about yay big with their body plus tail, and then the females will be like this big with their body plus tail. And obviously those are very rough approximations of me just eyeballing it with my hands, but the males will typically be bigger and the females will typically be smaller. Of course, there's always exceptions. You're gonna have a spectrum of the size of females and the size of males, and maybe you have a small male and a big female, whatever, you get the point. Generally speaking though, the females are smaller than the males. Another difference between the males and females is the price. Males are usually more expensive than the females are, and this is because the males are typically more desirable than the females. That can be due to their coloration, the fact that they don't lay eggs, just there is higher demand for the male chameleons versus the females. So males are typically priced at a higher point. So if you're on a budget and you're still wanting to get a chameleon and you're willing to put in all the time, all the money that you can to give them an awesome life, and you're just looking for maybe a chameleon that's just a little bit cheaper, then a female chameleon could be a good option for you. But I'm no way in any shape or form implying that you should get a female chameleon just because they're cheaper, because chameleons are very expensive, and honestly the cost of the chameleon is the cheapest part of owning a chameleon. You will put way more into their enclosures and their care than you will into the animal itself. So just keep that in mind, but I did want to call out that there typically is a price difference. So I briefly mentioned at the beginning of the video that yes, there's differences in their color and size and everything, but also in their care. So veileds and panther chameleons will lay infertile eggs. The females, not the males. Females will lay infertile eggs. Even if they've never been with a male before, they will still produce those eggs, very similar to how chickens will lay infertile eggs. So that can sometimes be a pro or a con depending on your experience level and what you're interested in when it comes to owning a chameleon. And we will talk a little bit more about the egg laying process, but in order to help reduce the number of eggs that a female is laying, we try to keep them at slightly lower temperatures. So this is where we have slightly different care requirements between a female and a male. A female veiled and panther chameleon basking temperature, we try to aim for around 80 degrees Fahrenheit, versus the male is closer to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Now it only seems like a 5-degree difference and doesn't seem like a whole lot, but that slightly lower temperature will help the female chameleon not lay as often, and when she does lay, she'll lay fewer eggs. Imagine a chameleon laying 20 eggs versus 60 eggs. The amount of stress and time and energy and resources it would take for her to produce 60 eggs versus 20 is significantly better on her body, and it will help with longevity and long-term health. So we try to keep them at slightly lower temperatures. And the other way we can impact how often they lay and how much they lay is by their diet. How much are we feeding them? So we try to be very strict in the quantity of food that we feed to chameleons. For our females, once they reach adulthood, a baby female will still eat as much as she can because she's still growing. But once they reach around anywhere from like 6 to 8 months old, depending on the growth of your chameleon, you want to start cutting them back on food. Usually it's closer to 8 months, but every chameleon is different. And so the general recommendation right now is to feed her 3 to 4 bugs every 2 to 3 days to try and keep her at a lean weight. If she starts to gain weight, then that just means there's a high likelihood she will produce more eggs, which is what we're trying to avoid. So let's talk about the egg laying process a little bit. So I said that they will lay these eggs even if they've never been with a male before, which means we need to provide them something called a laying bin, which is a little box that you can provide for her, typically with washed play sand. So then she can dig down, turn around, pop her little eggs out, climb back out, cover them up, and then, but in theory, she thinks they will hatch, but we know that they're infertile and that they won't. But we have to provide her somewhere to lay her eggs because they do go and dig down in the wild. It could be, your bioactive bottom, floor of your enclosure. It could be a potted plant, but most often we provide them a laying bin. And I do have an entire video just on egg laying, what to expect, what to do, what can go wrong, how to set up the laying bin, everything that goes into the entire egg laying process. Is like a 20-minute video just on egg laying. So I'll link that up above and in the description box below for you guys to check that out because it is super essential if you have a female veiled or panther chameleon that you watch that video probably multiple times. Now, if you have a Jackson's chameleon and you have a Jackson's female, she will give live birth. So the females will retain sperm. So even if she's never been with a male while in your care, if there's even a remote chance that maybe at some point in her life she was next to a male, like literally next to, not like separate enclosures, then she could retain that sperm. And then even months later, just boop, pop out Jackson's chameleons because they give live birth. So that's something to keep in mind and something you may want to research if you have a Jackson's chameleon. So if we have this laying bin, it needs to go inside of her enclosure. Most people just keep the laying bin in there 24/7 all year long, so then they don't have to worry about looking out for the signs of her becoming gravid, showing signs of being receptive, and then putting in the laying bin. So that brings me to the enclosure size. Back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I'm only talking like 2-3 years ago, the recommendation for a male enclosure was 24 by 24 by 48 inches. And then for a female, it was 16 by 16 by 36 inches, which is obviously smaller than the male enclosure. And I've just never really understood this because people have always been like, oh, well, they're smaller chameleons, so they can do fine in a smaller enclosure, which is true. But why would you settle for a smaller enclosure when we do have larger enclosures available on the market? Not to mention, we have to put a laying bin in there, which is going to take a significant amount of floor space for her. So I've always suggested that you just go for the 24 by 24 by 48 inch tall enclosure for your female chameleon. Not only does that give her plenty of space to climb around, but it also ensures that your UVB and temperature gradients are where they need to be, because a 36 inch tall enclosure and a 48 inch tall enclosure are going to have slightly different UVB gradients if you're both rocking a T5 6% or 5.0 UVB bulb on top of those enclosures. So if you just get her the 48 inch tall one, then you know that your UVB gradients are where they need to be, along with temperature, climbing space, laying bin, everything else that I've already discussed. So that's my 2 cents. Obviously, you can do whatever it is that you feel comfortable, but that's my recommendation. There's 2 last things that I want to touch on: temperament and lifespan. So temperament is kind of their personality, right? And their willingness to interact. Are they chill? Are they, feeling defensive? So generally speaking, females have been known to have a chiller temperament, to be more, I guess, receptive to people being around them. So you can typically handle a female a little more often than a male. This isn't always the case. There are plenty of chill males and there are plenty of defensive females. But generally speaking, the females have been known to have super sweet, super chill temperaments. And I'm sure the comments down below are going to be flooded with people raving about how much they love their female chameleons because they have such an amazing reputation. So a big part of me getting Venus, who is my female panther chameleon, was to see that firsthand for myself. I really only have Neptune and Luna is a female, but she's a Parsons chameleon, and Parsons are known to be chill just as a species as a whole. Neptune's obviously very defensive, very feisty, and so I'm excited to share with you guys and bring light and attention to how awesome female chameleons can really be. As long as you set them up correctly, know their care, buy them from a good breeder, like, you really will be set up for success, and they can be amazing animals. So lifespan is the other one I wanted to touch on. So this is constantly changing and improving as we are learning more and more about chameleon care and doing a better job of caring for our females. But generally speaking, the females have a shorter lifespan than the males. That's just kind of common knowledge. That's just kind of the way it is. Again, there are always exceptions, but a big part of this is because of the egg-laying process that the females have to go through. That puts a lot of demand on their bodies, and that can take a toll on their lifespan. So the textbook answer, which is always subject to change, again, as we're improving our care, is for males is 5 to 7 years, and for females is closer to 3 to 5 years. I would love to know, for anyone watching, if you have any experience with lifespan of your males and females, and sharing them down below, because the more we hear from other people, the more we can try and make sure that is an accurate number. Neptune is turning 5 this year, so that puts him up in the, older age category, and little Venus is only a few months old at this point. So I'm hoping that she will live a long, happy life, but that's something to keep in mind as well when it comes to owning a female chameleon. I hope this video helped you understand some of the differences between males and females when it comes to coloration, care, enclosure size, temperament, everything else that I discussed. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave any questions or comments down below. Feel free to subscribe so you don't post a new video. Follow Neptune and all my chameleons on social media at Neptune the Chameleon. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! Over the few differences. Does it make sense? Aha! I got the hair. I knew there was a hair on my nose. Okay, rewind. Start over.